little by little, we tried to collect data everywhere we could. And in some cases, then the organization would say, well, if you're going to do that, then we will also track these things. And then, I mean, we had safety incidents on a North Sea oil rig dropping dramatically thanks to data being collected by Shell in the North Sea.
Are you telling me that this stuff is practical, Bruce?
I am telling
Practical
you that.
in
I am
business,
telling.
safety,
I am telling you
cultural
that.
environment?
All that.
Did you ever expect to live the life that you've lived?
What a great question. Not at all. I mean, I don't know what I expected, but there have been so many surprises along the way. And when I've to dive into why I think that is true is about 10 years ago I learned from the human design work, if you're familiar with that I'm a projector. And one of the features of people who are projectors is that you have to be invited into situations. You are not the type that you have to go get it, like totally goal-oriented people that are more other types of personality. Projectors have to be invited. And when I was told that about myself, I looked at my life and realized every single significant thing in my life, job, career path, life reinvention, was an invitation. Every single one. I was invited in. So it was kind of fascinating to me because no, I didn't have any idea that hardly any of it would happen. The fact that I had a career in New York City in musical theater, the longest running show in the world, I wasn't a theater kid growing up. I had no aspiration to be on stage, zero. So there were, and I could go on. So yeah, it's been a complete and utter surprise, and I'm still, now at my age, uh, wondering what's the next one, as opposed to, oh, this is what I want to do next. It's like, well, well, God, you've been spot on so far and surprised me constantly. So what's next? The last instruction was just wait for instructions.
Right? It's funny how that works sometimes. How you're like, I just need to go back to that last thing that I got there. Okay. All right. All right. Good reminder. Good reminder. You mentioned something there, though, about a fascination with human design. I think I know a little bit about it. Like I've definitely heard of it. I know of it, but I'm not like I've never dove in. Let's just say into human design. What is human design?
Well, I'm not a good reference point to really speak articulately about the this overall system. I know it's
Sure.
based upon date of birth, place of birth, time of birth, similar to astrology, but it's a whole different model for how the different ways our personality can manifest. And there are, I think, four or five different types that have been defined through this system. And again, I only know the connection in terms of what I learned about myself as what they call a projector. And in essence, what I found fascinating, one thing was projectors naturally engage with any environment, you and I'm not trying to project myself into your world, but it's just how I'm designed. When I go into a room, when I go into a restaurant, when I go into a company, when I'm going into a client engagement of any kind, I can't help but project myself. Projectors also uh, tend to be pretty empathic. So we can carry on or take with us the energy of a situation more so than other people would do. They'd be over it and done. But like the projectors is still dealing with the energetic overload they may have gotten at that event or in that conflict or whatever it was. So projectors have a different energy requirement. We need more breaks. We need more naps. We need because we take on more, not because we're trying to, just because that's the way we're designed. We need it to be invited in. We can't if we try to just take it like that's the goal. I want to be CEO. Blah blah blah. Good luck with that one. It's just not how it works. And that was fascinating to me because I thought I have resisted the idea of goals for most of my life. I've tried them and I've thought this does not at all feel connected to my life. I feel like life is supposed to unfold. That was just sort of my general philosophy. And then when I was told you're actually a projector, so yeah, goals wouldn't work for you. That
Mm.
wow, that's so interesting. I'm the type that needs to be invited. And then another point, the instructor, the gentleman who had been doing this kind of review for 25 years to that point, said to me was, uh, because you as a person have many different things you do. I'm a performer. I have an artistic side. I'm a photographer. I'm a writer. But I've got all these business skills of being CEO 3 times and strategic development and all this. There's a lot of reasons why people would invite you. So you're gonna have to get really good at saying no, because you're gonna be
Mm.
getting invitations all the time. And I thought, wow, has that been true? And so anyway, human design I think is interesting. Like with all of these systems that exist, I'm not like a born again human design person. I
Sure.
found I found I found value for me, and it continues to kind of inform some ways that I live. But so it's interesting to explore.
I think there's little nuggets of wisdom in there. Like even Tony Robbins, right? He goes through the Chinese medicine with his programs like wood, are you a fire? Are you a water? Are you a metal? Or excuse me, an earth? And I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of wisdom in the nuances of these things. So I'm actually just looking it up, which I've never done before actually on here. So there's creators, which are like the builders, or excuse me, generators, which are like the
Yeah.
builders. There's
Yes.
projectors, which are like the guides, which then there's the manifestors, which are kind of like the intuitive people, and then there's reflectors, which are more of like the observers of everything. So that's really interesting. I'm gonna dive a little deeper into that in whatnot. I mean, it makes sense to me that this would be kind of a realm that you would explore within your background, right?
Well,
Definitely with
and this was a great example. It came to me. I didn't go searching it
okay.
out. I think I'd heard about it, but I was in a startup about 10 years ago, and the founder of the startup, who was a very good friend of mine, said he wanted the entire management team to all go through it. And I thought this was fascinating as I got to learn about it. He said, because I want to find out where we have gaps as a leadership team and where we overlap. And it turned out the founder and I had lots of areas we overlapped. So if we weren't careful, we were going to be fighting to do the same things we were both good at, and neglect things we weren't so good at. And so it was quite fascinating to have a map of the 6 or 7 of us who were in the management team, where we had gaps, where we needed to fill in, because wow, this entire team isn't good at blah blah blah. So I found that's how I got introduced to it. So I got an invitation into human design, and then was told, actually that's your design, is you have to be invited to things.
Right, right. It's very interesting to me because what you're talking about here um, is like we write stuff like this off. I think way too much. I think intuitively there's something there, and I think we like logically would get in. We just write it off way too quick and way too much. So it sounds like this guy actually used human design almost like a personality test. Rather than giving you like Myers Briggs, you guys went through human design to just kind of see how you guys would operate. That's really cool. I've never heard of it used in that way
I
before.
thought it was awesome.
Other
Yeah.
than human design itself, what did you learn from that?
Well, learned a lot about my own energy. As I say, I was learning this at a time I was already into my 60s, and so it was not like I had not been on the path of personal development for already 45 or 50 years at that point. So I'd been exploring all kinds of things, and yet I found it so fascinating. Just this one dimension that I've mentioned several times of we need to be invited, and I thought so many times I think, oh wow, I'd love to work with that person, and sometimes it's just too much friction. But then once I'm invited, that's a whole nother story. And so I kind of pay attention to that. Is the invitation still open, or have they decided, okay, the invitation is now over? The month that we're going to get that's enough. Uh, Again, I'm not making rules for my life based upon that, but it's just an interesting energy to observe, and that was a big part of it. And then the other aspect too of just that my nature, which was not news to me, but I saw it, I heard it framed in a new way. My nature, which is to be many things, some would call it polymath. I've been a professional singer, dancer, photographer, actor, writer, executive, business development, educator at Stanford. I mean, I've been paid to do all of those things. So it's a wide range of skills, and that's cool in one way. On the other hand, it can make you chaotic. Well, which one am I today? Which one do I want to be focused on today? So it's just been helpful to kind of think through what as a support for my own sense that part of the goal of life is not just to go after things that we want, but to be open to what the gifts are that are coming to us that aren't so obvious, that wouldn't necessarily suit our personality or our preference. And that's what has surprised me about my life, was so many things that happened to me, for me, that I would not have consciously picked before it happened. And then when I
Mm.
got into it, it's like, wow, of course I was supposed to have been an actor. Of course. How did I go my entire childhood not being drawn to it at all?
Yeah.
You know, so, but, and many other things similarly, where it's like, wow, of course. So I've learned that the joy of being surprised by life and allowing things to happen and then just think, wow, wow, that is so cool. I never would have expected that to happen out of this.
Right, right. You said it multiple times here already that you have done so many different things and so many distinct things in your life. By the way, like a totally mediocre, no, like at a fairly high level, right, from worldly standards here of what you've actually done. One thing I really wanted to ask you was like, you're keynote speaker. You've done a lot of consulting, leadership, management, personal development. You were, working with the HeartMath Institute, which I want to dive into seriously, for more curiosity than anything. But what I wanted to ask you was like, what is the topic that you enjoy speaking on the most of all of the vast majority of things that you've done?
That's a really hard question, because it's like which is your of the 15 kids that you side, which is your favorite? Like, well, I love them all for different reasons. I mean, right
Don't
now,
lie. I have a favorite son. Stop it. No, just kidding. Sorry. It's a bad joke.
yeah, it really does vary. It depends. Like when people ask me, "What's your favorite food?" I say, "Well, it depends, man. It
Mm.
depends." Yes, I love Thai. I love sushi. I'll be having a, a grass-fed hamburger sometimes. Damn, wow. So it's hard to really pick a favorite. But as far as what I like talking about, I think now in this point of my life and in this point of our lives collectively as a humanity, as a planet, um, how do we get through it without
Mm.
killing ourselves is one of the big questions. And to me, both based on my life experience and what I've gone through, coming back to playfulness, coming back to the unique creativity that I have, that I am designed to be, to have and to express. I'm interested in that conversation because for myself, having been a cancer survivor in a 2 year period where it was cancer, then it was surgery, then it was immunotherapy, then it was staph infections, then staph got in my blood, which is life threatening. Then I finally got through all of that. Then my mother passed away, my marriage was ending. Then I had to have both hips replaced. All of that happened. Then I finally decided I needed to not be CEO of HeartMath anymore because I needed to heal. I needed to manage me, not anything else, right? So all that happened, but it also reawakened in me this realization that if I am not singing, I'm not fully me. If I'm not dancing, I am not fully me. I can't just be one thing. But on the other hand, if I'm only singing and dancing, which I haven't been only that in over 50 years, then I'm not me either, because I enjoy business. I enjoy having conversations like this. I enjoy thinking strategically and thinking about the world, seeing where we're going, where consciousness is evolving into. So I guess my favorite topic of a conversation is how to weave all these things that I love together. That's my favorite. Like
That's
how to
life,
bring an
right?
artistic perspective in, how to bring a musical perspective in, how to bring a design perspective into things. Uh, because to me, at the end of the day, it is all one. We are part of a wholeness, and we can think we're separate. I have friends who turn off the news thinking they're not going to be affected by it. I said, well, good luck with that, because you're still walking through the energetic fields of all the people who are really depressed right now, or really discouraged right now. And you can say you're above it. Oh, I don't pay attention to the news. But then you don't feel the person in the checkout line who's embarrassed because their credit card just failed. You're not feeling that. You're that closed off to life that you can't feel what they're feeling. So anyway, I think we're all one is what I'm trying to say, and the mystics have been saying that forever, and physicists are saying that too, and like, yeah, we really are. So how to then, okay, if we really are one, we really are interconnected species. Everything we do affects everything else. then how do we address that with as much love, with as much care, as much compassion, as much forgiveness as we possibly can? Because for me, at the end of the day, it is about the heart, and about living from the heart, and recognizing the pain and suffering and hearts of each other, no matter who we are, who they are, what gender, what preference, what ethnicity, what nationality, anything.
What do you do to inspire yourself into all of these different things? Because you said there like at least 3 times, like you just want to be you, and this is an aspect of you, and I'm not being me if I don't do that, and I'm not being me if I don't do this, and it's like, it's, by the way, when I'm asking these questions, it's not like I expect you to have all the answers here. Like, we're all living life for the first time in this body, at least, right? Depending on what people believe. That being said,
Yeah.
like it's a constant. Someone uses that I work with uses a really good expression that I love, is life is a constant state of remembering, right? And one of the reasons why I love that is because you're not going to have all the answers, even some of the things I'm asking. But like, for yourself, how do you keep yourself inspired? How do you know what I mean by that? Like, how do you actually dive in to make that happen and to keep that in your own mind when you're trying that new thing?
Well, I guess for me, there's several things which, if I have slipped and stopped doing them, I realize things are starting to get too much friction. And one of those things is being out in nature multiple times a day. Multiple times a day, being outside, being out of the room, being away from my computer, being off my phone. Not because those are bad things, but because I am not a one-dimensional person that needs to be online all the time, and that's the only way I can survive. Not at all. I have to be in nature. I love taking photography. I love taking awesome iPhone photographs of the mountain that's sitting right outside my window right now. It's a spectacular view. And so getting outside to see the beauty of a wildflower that most people won't even notice, but I'll get up on close with it. And thanks to my iPhone macro lens, I can get really close into that and see a bug that I didn't see with my naked eye and take a picture of that. And I can just be like a 5-year-old kid, just enchanted with life. And I didn't used to be that way. And this is a post-cancer part of me that kind of reawakened, was be amazed by little things in life. And so, to me, that's a big part of being inspired, is allowing myself to remember there is an incredible world outside this building, outside of my thoughts and my particular life geometries, and it's there to look at and absorb and to be rejuvenated by. So that's a big part of my inspiration. Another part is dance. I am born to dance. I don't dance every single day, but when I dance, and I let go, and I have a blast, and I get off on the fact that, and I'm doing it on two titanium hips. I'm about to turn 73, and people are like, "There's no way any of those things are true."
Stop it! Right, that's what I was about to say. Stop it! No way! Wow. Okay.
So the inspiration I get from the fact that I love whatever people think about me is not the point. The fact that I can dance with joy and with release and often with the ability to experience things in myself that I'm holding on to. And through the dance, I'm able to just let go of that. Like when I first started this particular type of dance that I particularly like, it's called 5 Rhythms. It's a kind of conscious dance, for lack of a better term, but it's really exploring different vibes in the context of an hour and a half or 2 hours. When I was first experiencing this, it was just a few months after my mother had passed away. And it was also a few months after my marriage had ended. And it was also just about 3 months after I had stepped down as CEO of HeartMath. Other than that, I hadn't had much loss, right? So obviously big periods of loss there. And I would find spontaneously on the dance floor some track. It could have been classical. It could have been rave. All of a sudden, I'm feeling this grief come up around my mom and just a sense of loss. And I was able to experience that and feel that and heal some of that. And so that's how I inspire. Dance is a very big part of helping me to inspire. I meditate a lot. I'll do 10 minutes, 5 times a day some days. If it's a really challenging day, where I'm dealing with complex personal dynamics, and there's been some weird financial stuff going on in my life lately, I'll take another 10 minutes on the mat, because I'll think this is my life, and I'm feeling pretty tense now. I need to let go of some of this tension, and so I'm a frequent meditator, and a lot of times I use music in the meditation to facilitate shifting my internal state, so I can get some inspiration going again and realize, dude, you have dealt with worse than this. I have to remind myself often, dude, you have dealt with worse than this. That 2-year period, that would bring most people to their knees. And not only did it not bring you to your knees, you've been reborn afterwards. And now in the new life, you got to still deal with stuff. It's not like you're just walking around enlightened all the time. Not at all. So there's a number of different ways, and I'm not even mentioning just the value of a pure connection with another human being. Like, I'll be honest with you, today I was really looking forward to meeting you and having this conversation. You came highly recommended by somebody I respect a lot, Noah Tetzer. And Noah has always introduced me to interesting people. And I thought, this is going to be fun. I haven't done an interview in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks maybe, I'm not sure. And I enjoy it because I learn about the person through the questions that they ask me, and often by the examples that they share. I thought, I'm going to learn something. And the opportunity to connect and not just be in my own world of thoughts and plans and ideas and worries or whatever it may be is a way I inspire myself. And so I was like, well, this is great. This is a good day, even though I do have to check out of my room.
Right.
So
yeah, I know it's for me. I just love people. I really do. Before I was recording, before I was doing anything along those lines, I was always the grab coffee guy with me, right? Grab coffee. Let's get together. Let me hear what's happened. What has happened in your life? I was always that rare people. I think, in the younger generations don't really appreciate. I think, what is that expression? Youth is wasted on the young and wisdom is wasted on the old. First of all, I reject it. However, that's like a common expression. And I'm like, but I was always that person that like wanted to go, like, what was it like growing up in the Bronx in the 60s? Right? My Aunt Rose lived to be like 105, was literally featured on Smuckers. And every time I would, the jam for being over 100 years, right? Like that was like their celebration. And,
I remember that.
right. She literally, remembered her phone number, which was a single digit in the Bronx from like the 20s and 30s, right? And I remember like sitting with her, and she's a walking history book. She literally lived in New York, V-Day, the assassination, landing on the moon, JFK, MLK, right? Vietnam. Like, I remember asking her and talking to her, and it's just always been my thing anyway, where I just love people and the stories of people and what they've been through and their lived experience, right? What they've actually gone through, both the positive and the negative, right? It's so, I don't know, I can't comprehend why more people don't cherish or love that in the stories. And there's a very intentional reason why I'm asking you about like your thoughts on human design, or your like what actually inspires you, or why do you do all these different things, is because I could talk about heart math all day long. However, I want to understand like what led you there, what thought process, right? We are what we think, or we become what we think, right? Earl Nightingale. So I'm like, how does this person look at the world, which is what brought you here where you are today? That's what's fascinating to me and always has been, because to hear everything that you've done kind of on that high level that you've been invited into, that's news to me. I would never have guessed that. You know what I mean? Just from initial, like if I read somebody's biography, you get one thing totally different than when you actually connect soul to soul, human to human, and you go,
Yeah.
wow, invited. I'm trying to like think back in my own life, and I'm like, you know what? There's an element there for myself too. It's being invited in. It's somebody going, hey, you guys would meet. You guys would love each other, right? Like you guys should connect. And you go, and some of the opportunities, some of the business opportunities, is someone going, we got this idea. I think you might be able to help us with bringing me into that. The first business I ever bought and sold, it's like same thing. And now that I'm thinking about it now, I'm like, I might have to dive into human design. I don't even know what to expect with it, but I'm like, this is very fascinating to me already, right? For you,
Yeah.
I gotta
Cool.
hear more of like the practical historical side of things. How did you, where did heart math come from? And how did you get plugged in?
Well, let me share a little bit about my background because it's absolutely, why I was ultimately drawn to heart math. I was really drawn to the founder, who didn't even call it HeartMath yet. I'd known the founder, who's a man named Doc Childrey, for 10 years prior to HeartMath starting as an institute, but way before. And it was an institute to explore the nature of the heart and the nature of love, and why in Western civilization we were dissing the heart left and right. We were saying, don't bring your heart to work. It's going to get you in trouble. Don't decide with your heart. You know what's going to happen. And yet we tell your kid, just go out and play with your heart, or hey, sweetie, we know it's a big deal to speak in front of that assembly. If you just speak from your heart, everything will be fine. That didn't mean just speak with your pump, just play with your pump. That it meant more than that, right? But Western civilization was conflicted, schizophrenic. I was way all into that, but because I grew up the son of two pacifist parents who had chosen pacifism during the Second World War. This was not a popular position, but they had come to the conclusion separately, and then they met, that war was not Christ-like. That, and they had a strong faith, but not conservative evangelical style. It was more of the message of the man they admired the most was a peacemaker, was embracing all people, not about conflict, not about war. That's the Old Testament stuff, not. And so they became part of a pacifist movement and concluded that all war, it will eventually kill us all if we continue to believe that war is ever a solution. It will eventually kill us all. And whether or not that happens, that's the milieu I was raised in. And growing up in a relatively in New Jersey, which was very aware, relatively speaking, not being far from New York City, and growing up in a time in the 50s and 60s when the civil rights movement was growing. And I lived in a lily white suburb, but I was working with high schools in Newark, which weren't lily white, and they hadn't seen many white kids, and I hadn't seen many black kids, and we were trying to, hey, how do we coexist here? At the same time, two of my brothers sent to Vietnam, the same year that Bobby Kennedy was killed, Martin Luther King was killed. It was a rough period for me as a teenager, going through what I was going through just as a teenager, let alone family members, both of whom were wounded, both survived the war but died young. Meanwhile, heroes were being killed left and right. Same ones you mentioned: Malcolm X, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King. And so I was growing up at a time when love and peace was becoming a thing, and with parents who were not hippies by any stretch of the imagination, but embraced values of love and peace. They absolutely did. My father would recite with me, he taught me, and we recited it many times as I was a small boy going to sleep, the prayer of St. Francis. Not the Lord's Prayer, the prayer of St. Francis, which begins, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. And my father wanted me to be a peacemaker in life, not a warrior. And that's how I was raised. And they were both super creative. My father had a day job in Manhattan, but he was an awesome singer. He could have been opera level, beautiful voice, cool with the gardens, designed these beautiful gardens all around the house that they designed with an architect. My mother was a genius level visual artist, painter, sculptor, textiles, you name it. So I was raised in a very creative household that was very loving and very peaceful. 5 sons. I don't remember any of us ever fighting. Not that, and not because we were all caught up. There was a lot of fun. There was a lot of laughter. That's how I was raised. So it's like later on, of course, it became obvious that this is really not the way most people are raised. But again, it looked normal, and I looked so normal to everybody else. You look like the all-American kid, but you got these views that are a little not as normal. So the heart was a natural thing for me. I didn't talk about it. Didn't think about it. But my father was very loving. I was aware that my father, for his generation, growing up, he was 17 when the Depression hit, so he was very affected by the Depression. Grew
Wow.
up on a farm, and was running the family farm at a certain point. But I was also very aware. My dad is is not afraid to tell me he loves me. My dad is not only not afraid to hug me, he wants to hug me. And Dad, you can back off a little on the hugging of the girlfriends. You may want to not want to do that quite so much, Dad, but he was a loving man. He was very friendly, very warm-hearted, unusually so for that generation. So I was that's how I was raised. You know, at a certain point later in life, I realized I am my dad. I am my dad. I am. I used to be so embarrassed by how much he would network. Like we'd go to the IHOP for Sunday dinner after church, and as soon as the waitress would come up to the table, he'd say, hi, Bethany. I'm Earl, and this is Marguerite, meaning my mother. This is Mrs. Root, my meeting my grandmother, and this is our son Bruce. And he'd introduce us all to the waitress. You know, like, hey, and I've been wanting to crawl under the table, but later on in life, I realized Dad's warm-hearted nature won him a lot of friends. A lot of people loved Mr. Cryer because he was just a genuinely warm guy, and he'd hug you and wouldn't be afraid about it. And so that this is the picture that I'm painting is in reference to why HeartMath. It not only didn't feel odd, it felt like the natural. Of course, I should be part of HeartMath. In fact, before we even had formally started as an organization, this was back in around 1989, 90, somewhere there. HeartMath officially started in 91, but we were already forming it. I said out loud in front of a group of people in public at one point. I said, I am very clear that I am a man of the heart, and I am here to pursue a path of love, a path of the heart. I had no idea what I was saying. I had no idea what that actually would mean. In reality, it sounds lovely. It sounds like, oh wow, roses and daffodils. I mean, this would be amazing. Well, not at all. If you're really picking the path of the heart, that means you experience it all, not just the loving side. That means really experiencing the grief and growing through that, really experiencing the fear and growing through that, and really allowing your heart to expand, not just when it's easy to, because wow, what an incredible sunset, but wow, that diagnosis, oh man, wow, how do I go? Yeah, you know, when I sat in the doctor's office, I knew I had a tumor. And he said, based on where it is in your body, it's definitely cancer. So I had like, okay, wow, I'm one of those people. We now know I have cancer in me. And luckily this guy was a good guy and he took care of it. And I'm 17 years cancer free. But at that moment, it was like, wow. You know, so I guess I'm rambling a little in answer to your question, but all of these strands of my development and my own growth were what made HeartMath just seem like such a natural thing. And HeartMath as an organization, part of what drew me was the fact that our intention was to be very scientific in our approach, not just another spiritual group or another, you know, guru on the stage who's going to tell you, well, this is how life needs to be. In fact, the guy who founded it, you never see him. He hasn't been a public person in basically ever. But I love the fact that we wanted to use mainstream science to validate our theories about the heart, that the heart is not just a pump. There's way more going on, but we needed to prove that scientifically, not just with another diagram of chakras. That and a lovely picture of a magnetic field. We had to prove. Oh, can you actually measure that? Yes. Can you actually measure rhythms of the heart and how they're affected by emotion? Yes. Is it repeatable? Yes. Is it true for everybody? Yes. So once we had proven enough things, the story became much more interesting than just a spiritual philosophy, and that was something that always really appealed to me too. I was never a scientist, never in any way tempted to pursue a scientific career, but was fascinated by science and studied it enough that I thought this is cool. It's not for me, but it's cool. And part of what I found a lot of fulfillment in with HeartMath and continue to this day is the fact that there's a lot of very grounded science that helps explain what people intuitively know, but didn't know how to talk about it. They knew their heart was telling them things, but that sounds too woo to even say. Well, we came along and said, well, here's some science. And the fact that we used a lot of highly validated techniques and methods of research gained us a lot of acceptance at places like Harvard for the Harvard Business Review, Stanford, on and on. So that was very appealing to me too. That this was not just another spiritual philosophy coming down the pike, like from California, like the world needed another one from California, but something far more grounded. And I think that's very likely one of the reasons you had heard about it. One of the reasons many people heard about it was, wow, these HeartMath people, they're pretty sciencey. We'd say, yeah, we are, because if we're going to make an impact on society and the leaders of organizations and communities and agencies, they care about data. That's part of their job. They got to be looking at numbers. This just comes with the territory. So if you don't give them validatable and reliable data about these crazy ass, California theories, they're gonna laugh you out of the room. But when you give them enough data that's real and not just made up, then you guys have done your homework, haven't you? Yeah, we have. So
Right.
that's a lot of long answer to your question. What was the path that drew me to HeartMath? But it's kind of all of that, all of that.
I love it. Hey, long-winded answers, welcome. Makes me feel right at home because I do the same. That being said, here, I mean, how was it? Like, it sounds like you guys felt immense responsibility. I was gonna say pressure. Responsibility seems like a better word. To be very measured in responses, in what you released, in the studies, in the data. Did you guys feel that as an organization? And was there different studies or different things that you felt like, you know what? We're pretty close to knowing XYZ or having this answer or proving X or this. We're just not there yet. We need to revalidate this or we need to redo this. Hold off for now.
Yeah, all of that is true. Some studies that we've realized this is too small a study. It's too speculative. It will appeal to a certain group of people who love heart math, but it will not appeal to certain decision makers of organizations. I mean, we've worked with many companies where thousands of employees in huge companies all went through heart math programs. If we weren't careful with some of the research, we could easily lose the opportunity to make that level of impact. So, but the other key point I would say that a lot of people don't necessarily know this part of the HeartMath story is that we had some very, very impressive scientists join our scientific advisory board early on in the early 90s. One of the guys who was considered the father of biofeedback, scientist named Joe Kamaya. Stanford physicist Bill Tiller was one. The guy who created the term and the study around what's called heart rate variability. And HRV, heart rate variability, is in every wearable device now. It's in the Apple Watch, it's in the Whoop, in the Oura Ring. We didn't invent HRV, but we know the guy who did. And he became part of our scientific advisory board in 1993 or so. So we had, and there were many, many more than just the ones I'm mentioning. So we had the top brain scientist from Stanford, Dr. Carl Preben, was on our advisory board. So these guys were not going to put their name to things if we were just wildly making claims that we couldn't substantiate. So they were a governor on our system. Not that we were going to be wild anyway, because we knew we are going to be under attack because we're out of left field. But if we've done our homework and we've checked our homework with some people that really know their stuff and understand how journals work and understand how skeptical scientists would respond, then we're much better in covered. So those many conversations with the advisors, the annual advisory board meetings, where we'd hash out the issues and they'd have all their perspectives, were very influential in helping us shape. And again, we had no interest in going out too quick with the study, because then the whole foundation of us being a if anything, veering towards the conservative side of research, that reputation would be gone, and then we would have a much smaller segment of people that we could potentially impact. So that I loved that. I thought I can get behind this, and there was a place for me in this, because while I was not a researcher, I'm a communicator. And I can tell stories, even scientific ones, in compelling ways. So the fact that there was so much science meant I could be in rooms where I was the only one in the room that didn't have a PhD or an MD, and they'd still respect me, because what I was saying had validity to them to their scientific minds. So I love that about HeartMath, and to this day I enjoy talking about some of the key scientific discoveries because they make so much sense to people. It
What
just
are a few what are a few of those key studies? Somebody that's never heard this before. I don't know how you could possibly have never heard of this before, by the way, but however, like what are some of those key discoveries?
Well, I think the one that's probably the most significant is this notion that we uncovered, and it's related to HRV, the heart rate variability, which is that we discovered a link between a person's changing emotional state. It could be happy one second, worried the next, joyful, sad, whatever it is, or if it's just continuously depressed or continuously elated, whatever it may be. There's a connection between what a person's moment by moment emotions are and how their heart is actually beating. And so what was discovered in the early 90s by us was that the heart rate variability is really a term describing how our heart is changing speed in patterns. So when we're very balanced and we're feeling very in tune with life, beautiful sunrise, you're feeling happy with your partner, with your pet, whatever, the heart naturally beats in this smooth rhythm. It looks like a sine wave, meaning it's getting faster and faster and faster for maybe 5 or 6 seconds. Then it's slowing down in a very steady, slowing, slower, slower, slower. Then speeding up and speeding up and speeding up, and then slowing down and slowing down and slowing down. That's heart rate variability. The average person, we're all over the place. We get interrupted by a text message, and suddenly our attention goes there, but our worry goes there because of the person is from, let's say. And so our heart rate variability is not this beautiful, smooth, up and down natural rhythm. It's this chaotic. It's jumpy at times because we are literally feeling jumpy. And so we were able to demonstrate with hundreds and eventually thousands and probably ultimately hundreds of thousands of people. Well, yeah, it's even more than that now. That the emotion you're feeling has a direct correlation with the pattern your heart is beating in. And why is that significant? Well, number one, the signal of your heart is 60 times stronger in amplitude than the brain. 60 times stronger. So your heart, the signal from your heart is literally being transmitted instantaneously to every cell in your body. The rhythmic pattern, therefore, is also going to every cell in the body. So if the rhythm is smooth, that's the body getting a smooth rhythm, like, the waves are coming up on the beach. This is lovely. When you're feeling chaotic, the rhythm is chaotic. The signal being sent to the entire body is chaotic. Guess what? When you're in a worried state, a frustrated state, an angry state, that's when you say something you're going to regret. That's when you make a very short-sighted decision. That's when even physical coordination can be thrown off, because the chaos of the emotion is causing chaos in the heart rhythm, which is affecting every one of the trillions and trillions of cells in our body, especially our brain and nervous system. So that link, that our emotional state is tied into how our heart's beating, how our brain is performing. That link had never been validated before. A lot of people would say, well, that's intuitively true. Of course, you're right. I'm stupid when I'm rushing. I make bad decisions when I'm running around all the time, or when I'm overly worried about something. Yes, that's face value true. Now you guys have some science to prove it. Okay, I like you guys. So that's that essential idea. When you're in a loving state, when you're meditating and feeling gratitude for the world, for life, for nature, for God, whatever, your heart naturally goes into this beautiful, smooth sine wave is the name for it. Beautiful, smooth pattern that every cell in your body being bathed by that. But when the worries are going on, the frustration is present, which for most of us, that's a lot of the time, then our system is bathing in these kind of chaotic patterns. Like visually, earthquake is what negative emotions generates. That's what it literally looks like, an earthquake pattern on the screen. Happy feeling, appreciative feeling, loving feeling, this beautiful sine wave pattern. So that one understanding was not, we were the ones that came up with that. We were the ones that did that research and said, HRV is a really cool way to measure what's happening in our emotional state and therefore what's happening in our entire body. And we can control it. That was the other big part of this was it's not just a thing that happens like, and it's just automatic. We can control it. We can learn how to create that smooth wave. And HeartMath over the years created various technologies, computer-based devices, handheld devices, as well as sensors that can help you train yourself to get into that smooth pattern more of the time. Because guess what? We all have done it. We have had those moments in our life where time stood still. You had the conversation. I can't believe we've been talking for 3 hours. Not us. We haven't been going that long. We've had those moments. Or looking at a sunset, or being with your child, or being with a pet, where it's just like, wow, this life is so good. And had you been hooked up to a monitor, you would have seen the heart rhythm very smooth.
Mm. Right. I was going to say it hasn't been 3 hours. No one's been banging on the hotel door yet. So
Not yet.
not yet. Right. But that's like not casual of a discovery of something. You did say something there. You said we can control it. Is this as simple as controlling your emotions, your internal state, as Tony Robbins would say, or what is like? How do we control it?
I would say at the core of the HeartMath approach, it has been to regulate your breathing while at the same time learning to generate a more positive emotion. So controlling your breathing, of course, everybody's got breath techniques these days. Everybody's got all sorts of different ways, 4-7-8, 4-4-4, whatever. HeartMath, we recognize that, number one, we wanted to be simple, and we wanted to tie it into existing physiological research. And it turns out there is a rhythm in the body called the RSA, respiratory sinus arrhythmia is the technical term for it, which says that when our heart is beating at about, when our breath is in a rhythm of about 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out, 5 seconds on the in breath, 5 seconds on the out breath. The term for that is respiratory sinus arrhythmia. The heart and lungs are in sync. This is very efficient for the heart and lungs to be breathing in that rhythm. So that's just the breathing pattern. So that's why HeartMath has always advocated breathe around 5. Don't be in a metronome where you got to time to switch. Like that's not the approach. But roughly 5 in, 5 out. It can be 4.5. It could be 6.5. But a steady rhythm. But imagining you're doing that through the heart, even though you can't literally breathe through your heart, but you're kind of focusing there because that takes the energy away from where the mind is all worried and upset. And in general, I'll often refer to my daughter who is about to turn 40, shockingly. But with the first moment I held her, which was just moments after she came out of her mother, the feeling of holding her next, against my chest was a feeling. It wasn't my head that was feeling it; it was my heart that was just like, "Oh my God, oh my God!" What? And the feeling in the heart. So, and many of us feel in the heart. We feel a joy, a relief, an elation. So we encourage people to imagine you're breathing in and out through the area of the heart. But for most of us, the idea of then trying to feel gratitude, for example, that's harder. Breathing is one thing, but you mean I'm actually supposed to try to feel another feeling? And we'll say, yeah, because you're choosing feelings every moment you are alive anyway. You just happen to keep picking your favorite bad feelings, worry, frustration, anxiety. You keep defaulting to those, but you're actually picking those too. You could feel that for a moment or try another one. So it includes practicing the idea of just focus on appreciation for the next 30 seconds. And that could be have a rogues gallery of all the people that you really are grateful for in your life, and just feel the gratitude for bring again our mutual friend Noah. He's a great human being. Never met him in person. Many Zoom calls with him, many text messages. Wonderful guy. I'm very grateful to him. He's never asked for anything from me. He just keeps on giving, and a wonderful human. And so I could just think about different people that I'm really grateful for as part of that practice. So you're breathing in a steady rhythm, which is slower than most people normally breathe. So you're taking control of your system. You are controlling your state, absolutely, physically as well as emotionally. And then you're making at least an effort to try to feel appreciation or gratitude as opposed to whatever else you were feeling, which could have been worry or anxiety or whatever it was. So you're practicing. You're practicing, and this is something very similar to what Joe Dispenza talks about. You're practicing the state you want to be in. And of course, Joe has been very influenced by HeartMath and has been collaborating with HeartMath for 15 years or more. So there's a lot of synergy between these ideas that we need to practice these things. We are very practiced at worry, anxiety, depression, whatever our particular brand of negative self-talk may be. But we're not so good. We haven't been practicing the positive ones so much, which is why I keep going outside. Which is why I go in for a more meditation. I'm thinking I'm feeling a little stuck right now. I'm feeling a little stuck in this. I am a projector. I pick up stuff from people, from the environment. I can get stuck in it. I know that. So I have to practice. I put myself in situations where certain days there's a certain piece of music. I need to listen to that music right now because that's going to enable me to shift my emotional state easier than if I didn't listen to that George Michael song or that or that Ram Dass chant that is a musician named Ram Dass, not the spiritual teacher. So whatever it may be, I'll pick things because I know, that's going to get me into a certain state. It's going to help me get into that state which I need right now because of what I'm going through right now. So we're practicing, we're developing parts of ourselves that naturally developed when we were younger, but now at whatever phase we're in our life now, we've got all these pressures we didn't used to have, and it takes some new training, some new practice.
What was it like when you guys were like now, thanks to people like you, thanks to the Joe Dispensas, the Lynn McTaggart, which was massively influential in my life from the field. That was probably like one of the first times intellectually I started to understand what I was feeling intuitively, was reading The Field back in the day. And I'm like, wow, right. But thanks to people like you, this has really hit a zeitgeist. But before that, when you guys were walking on eggshells a little bit with the science and like, yeah, we need to be more careful. We don't want to ruin credibility here. Don't be rash and let things out or release studies. What was it like back then when it was still significantly more, dare I say, taboo?
Yeah. Well, we were very clear from day one that we were building a community for HeartMath internally. Those of us, there was about 30 people involved at the very beginning. It wasn't like one guy and then he had a team of 4 or 5 more. It was like 30 from day one. And so we were involved in everything, and we were literally building buildings and renovating properties and building programs and building infrastructures for businesses, but also spending a lot of time together, kind of learning what this HeartMath was even going to be. It was not a thing before we started. There wasn't already a set of tools and techniques and research. It was an evolving thing, founded a lot from within the gentleman, Doc Childrey, who was the founder. But it was also something we were all exploring and experiencing, and then finding ways to turn that idea into a tool that could be used for communication and team meetings in a company, or turning a certain concept into a meditation practice like I just described. So there was a lot of development, and we were practicing all this at the same time. And a lot of it was about coherence, about this idea of how do you not just be internally as aligned as you can be with yourself, your higher self, God, however you look at life, but also with each other. Because we were pretty clear, this is organization is about coherence. It's about entraining oneself and with others. So we have to be practicing that as best we possibly can. And I remember in the early days, especially, we didn't enter the corporate market right away. We were working in education initially, and some with more new thought religious groups like Unity churches and Church of Religious Science, people like that. But once we got into the corporate side, it was a little rougher, because now the expectation was higher for how we presented ourselves. We can't just be a bunch of warm-hearted hippies, apparently, from the Santa Cruz Mountains in California. We had to come across a little better. And I realized at a certain point that the way we were carrying ourselves was visible to many people, even if we didn't have the data yet.
So you were walking the walk. You were living it out as an organization.
There was a sense that you guys are on to something, because the way you communicate, the way you listen. This wasn't just me. I mean, I was doing a lot of work out in companies and organizations and healthcare, but there was a bunch of us that were doing that. And often this would be the response was, you guys are different. I don't fully understand this whole heart coherence thing yet. I don't get it. All these graphs, it makes me crazy. Actually, that's what some people would say. But there's something about you guys, and so I recognized that was true. That at the beginning we didn't have research studies, we didn't have a Harvard Business Review, we didn't have much of anything yet. We had silly looking charts and graphics that looked a little too hippie, but that eventually evolved. But it evolved because enough organizations would take a risk on us and say there is something to what you're saying. There's a common sense to what you're describing that I can't refute. You may not have all the data yet, but what's the worst that can happen? We ran into enough people who'd kind of like, I think we'll have a good time if we bring it into the management team of our Marriott hotel, which was one of our early clients, a Marriott hotel. I'll never forget walking into the executive conference room and like every guy sitting there, white shirt, dark blue tie, like, is this a cult? And all the women were dressed the same too, pretty much. I thought, wait a minute, which is the cult? Some people are afraid we're a cult. I'm thinking like, what did I walk into? What are you talking about? So anyway, I think that was a big part of what got us going and helped us attract some of these scientists too, because we were definitely, even our location in the Santa Cruz Mountains was not Silicon Valley. This was not a startup in a glitzy building. It's like you're way, way out there in the forest, kind of thing. So, but it was the sincerity, it was the genuineness of the approach. It was the fact that people would feel a care. They would feel a care. And they wanted to come back because you guys are just so darn caring. You're just one of the most caring groups we've ever met. And that carried us a long way. And then eventually the data kind of caught up with it. And now we'd have these very impressive studies from big companies, from hospital systems. And yeah, you're still caring, but now you got all this data. Okay, great. Now we're going to do the whole hospital, or we're going to do the entire division of 3,000 people, or whatever. So,
did you get like in the initial days? Did you guys get pushback from some of these companies? Some of the more corporate world of like, this woo woo, get away. Hey, listen, Bruce, I get the science. Thank you. And they just don't take deep enough dive, and they kind of just write it off. And the corporate world,
plenty of that. It was even with data around physical improvements, health improvements, some people would say, well, this sounds nice. It sounds like it would probably be helpful for our people, but here's the list of objectives that I've been given from my board, and nothing that sounds like HeartMath is anywhere in the top 5. So I would love to do it, but I can't get buy-in. We'd hear that a lot. Sure. Absolutely. Ironically, being that we were located pretty close to Silicon Valley, just up the hill, basically, there were enough companies in the valley who recognize we are all competing for talent. And if we aren't trying new things, they're going to say, oh, you're just like everybody else. So we got a lot of early adopters in Silicon Valley. Back when Intel was king, they were an important client. Cisco was an important client. Hewlett Packard was an important client. So we had brand name companies that would try us because they realized we've got to be trying stuff. We've got to be on the leading edge, or we're not going to get people to come to work for us. They can go down the road and work at Meta instead, or whatever. So that was an important part of it.
So how did you guys navigate that in the beginning without the proof? Did you just write it off and go, hey, the right people will find us, the right organizations will find us?
Well, one of the very important steps was we created our research team, along with a professor at the Naval Postgraduate School, created a psychometric survey, which was basically a set of questions. I think we started with 100 and we eventually narrowed it down to 50 key ones. But people would take this anonymous survey and say, how often in the past month was your sleep terrible? How often were you angry? How often did you have aches and pains? How often were you exhausted? How often did you feel appreciation? How often did you feel listened to? How often? So a set of questions, some of which were personal and emotional or physical, others that are about the organization. And as we kept using that and basically said, this is part of what we do, we will measure this. Again, this was a period of a lot of expansion. The 90s, there was a lot, especially in Silicon Valley, but in industrial companies, people were trying things. There was a lot of adventure. The dot-com hadn't burst yet. there was still a lot of growth and a lot of expansion. So we would find groups that would, okay, we'll do 25 people and we'll do a control group and we'll check it out. And then if the data came back strong enough and they could see the value, they'd bring it in a lot bigger. So we were happy to do data and not charge them for it, just collect some data. And in some cases, they would provide their own data. And then it was game over, because we had this one hospital that decided to train 400 of the 900 employees of the hospital. 400 were going to go through HeartMath through a trainer that we had trained, a nurse in the hospital. She was going to train these 400 people. And they collected all kinds of metrics, unbeknownst to us. And then a year later, they told us the results. And they said our attrition, because people quitting their jobs is a huge issue in hospitals, went from 28% down to 21% for the whole hospital this year. That's awesome. But when we looked at the group that went through HeartMath, it went from 28 to 6%. Only 6% of the HeartMath trained people wanted to quit. 21% of everybody wanted to quit. So, wow, what an impact we had thanks to those who went through HeartMath. We measured employee satisfaction. It had gone from the 73rd to the 93rd percentile across the whole hospital. Customer satisfaction had gone way up. They figured they'd saved $800,000 on staff not quitting because all these people wanted to stay, because their employer had provided free training to them that helped them in their life. It wasn't just about being a better nurse or better doctor. It was techniques they could use at home with their teenager, with their husband, with their spouse, whoever. So this was the value of all of this was enormous for the hospital, and they had all this data that they had tracked, involving millions of dollars of savings, and they had spent less than $100,000 on the whole thing. Once we had that, we went to town with hospitals saying, okay, we've got a hospital, their data. So little by little, we tried to collect data everywhere we could, and in some cases, then the organization would say, well, if you're going to do that, then we will also track these things. And then, we had safety incidents on a North Sea oil rig dropping dramatically thanks to data being collected by Shell in the North Sea. But it was because we had psychometric survey that we would also do, but they said, well, safety is our biggest worry out here, so we're going to, and they improved safety on an oil rig in the North Sea. So you get stories like that, you get data like that, and it's very compelling.
Are you telling me that this stuff is practical, Bruce?
I am telling you
Practical
that.
in business, safety,
I am telling you
cultural
that.
environment?
All that.
So I often call myself a missionary in business. I know there's a lot of preconceived ideas people have about the word missionary. It's for me, it's not for others. So I call myself a missionary in business. And I also don't believe in the religion of money, although I do believe very much so in free markets as a general concept. However, without morals, without love, it's just greed. Right.
Exactly.
So for what you're describing here sounds, in different words and stories and more experience, similar to what I'm saying here as I'm a missionary in business. The primary purpose of this business is to serve. And am I being rewarded for the service? Absolutely. Do I feel guilty about that? Absolutely not. And it just seemed like in your life, with what you've described here, you have, in your own way, combined the idea of love and measurable practical metrics of growth with being of service, right? People have this idea that they'll separate spirituality and business, or they'll conflate piety and poverty. And you're like, there's a place for spirituality, practically speaking, is what you're saying right now in business. It will help your business grow. It will save people's lives. Believe it or not, when people don't die on an oil rig, I can imagine production goes up too. Safety's great to keep that data, but there's also an element here. It's okay, there's a balance, right? So that's pretty remarkable to me that you're describing such a profound impact, not just HR's happier, the general mood, but no, people are more productive, right? And happier. That's the best of both worlds. Right. Did you ever expect that when you went down to that path of like, this is going to make profound impacts in actual productivity as well?
I I think we all imagined that had to happen, but the ability to measure that is not easy. So, for example, one time in the mid '90s, we gained Motorola as a client, and this was a big deal because the group that brought us in reported directly to the CEO. They were they were called the Emerging Technology Center, and they were tasked with find us new things we need to get involved in, whether that's products we should develop or things we should do for our people. So they picked HeartMath, and we did multiple projects inside Motorola. One in a factory, one with executives at the head office, and another with a software engineering group. With the software engineering group, these are engineers. How do you measure productivity? One of the ways they came up with was the patent attorney for that group discovered that he wrote twice as many patents in the period, the 3 months or whatever it was, since the program compared to the 3 months before the program, a
That's a
doubling
lot.
of the number of patents. Now, that's an N of one, right? We didn't keep studying. Well, I want maybe patents go up everywhere. We didn't study that. But my point is, they picked the metric. They said we doubled up the number of patents. We are working more efficiently together. There's not so much friction in getting stuff done. So as a result, we can get more. We were adding more value to the company. So we often had to kind of get creative because, but it was not that hard to find ways to measure it once we got into it. It was like we got more. None of us, and we were getting involved in the corporate side or healthcare side, had experience inside big companies or inside big health systems. None of us did. So we were learning as we went, and little by little, we were really, oh, here's what they need. Oh, here's what we have to do. Oh, we got to get much larger numbers. ends of 15 are not going to cut it. It's little companies might say, okay, great, but not big ones. They're going to where's your thousands of people? And eventually, sure, we have charts now, for years now with ends of 8,000 people, and looking at the change in sleep and the change in anxiety and the change in exhaustion and blood pressure. So, finding the metrics was a big deal.
Did you ever expect the impact to be as large as it was? Like everybody we've kind of referenced at this point in some form or another references heart math or applies your work as a pivotal like linchpin within their own work, like the Joe Dispenzas,
Yeah.
for example. Did you ever expect to have that big of an impact on the whole culture?
Well, yes and no. I mean, it's like kind of like I said earlier. It's fun being surprised when they come out. When Tony Robbins first started referencing HeartMath 20 years ago, and Joe. I think I first met Joe back in 2008 or seven or something. So it's a long time. Some of these guys have kind of been endorsing. So I didn't have specific expectations of what it might look like. The whole point was to be making an impact. We were all driven by the idea that there's got to be more heart brought into the world, and if we don't do it in a data approach, it's going to be another spiritual system that's written off. So let's see what happens. And I think there was a lot of optimism that we were on to something, and the research was always a big deal even for us. I mean, it was very exciting when our own research would, and not that all of it was positive or all of it was useful, definitely not, but there was enough that was like really impressive. I'll never forget, to me, one of the most compelling studies that was ever done on heart math was conducted at Stanford in a study of patients with congestive heart failure. Now that's people who basically are being told your heart's dying and you may also die. Congestive heart failure is a very serious diagnosis, and through a psychologist at Stanford who I trained to teach heart math for the purpose of the study, they trained a number of patients, average age 71, all diagnosed with congestive heart failure, taught them heart math techniques, the 5-second breathing, try to feel appreciation for your grandkids, for your doctor, for anything. And they were measured on several metrics compared against a control group that were just given a relaxation technique. And the group that learned heart math, their stress level went down about 22%. Their depression went down about 34% compared to a control group that was also being given some stuff to do. But the most dramatic one was their functional capacity, which meant how far you can walk in 6 minutes, basically how strong is your cardiovascular system, in essence, increased by 14%. So people with a potentially life-threatening diagnosis, their stress is going down, their anxiety and depression is going down, and they're getting stronger. And it's not
About
about
how long was the time frame of that increase? Ballpark's fine.
that's a probably probably a month or
Okay.
3 months at the most. So the question was, can we see some benefit relatively quickly? Because these are people that are seriously ill. You can't. Well, maybe in a year, so quickly, stress went down, depression went down, a sense of control was coming back into their life, and that was showing up also as they're getting stronger.
That's wild to me. It is your emotions, your thought, and your heart coherence literally affecting your biology. I still can't get over the fact that you're talking about actual productivity as well, right? So it just sounds to me like there's no aspect of life that this doesn't touch.
Well, we used to joke that just like we can't, who wouldn't benefit from this? Name the kind of person who would not benefit from this, and similarly, potentially, it doesn't mean everything's going to improve for everyone. That's not a thing either. But potentially, so many parts of our life could be positively impacted. We
One and
wouldn't guarantee that they all will, because it's still up to you and how you practice and decisions you're making. But if anything that you're doing to increase your own internal coherence, the more you're listening to your intuition, which happens when you're more coherent, the more you're improving your communication, which happens when you're paying attention to coherence, you're listening to yourself more, you're listening to others more. All of these things can improve if you are really stay conscious of, I've got to be more and more coherent, more and more using all the resources I have, and not in this constant state of static where I can't access all of the. I mean, all athletes in the world understand this principle.
hmm,
Whether
meaning
they call it heart coherence or not, they understand there's no way I'm going to perform at my best if I'm all over the place mentally and emotionally.
when they're taking a penalty kick for the World Cup, you see certain players staring at the ball. I actually do this often where I'll say like he's nervous, and then there's the other players that you'll see their close their eyes and take a breath and just
Exactly.
that internal state, right? One thing I wanted to ask you real quick here: how old were you when you became the CEO of HeartMath and then started this journey?
When I became CEO of HeartMath, that was in 2000, so that would be 26 years ago. So I would have been 46,
Okay.
47. Is that
Okay.
right? Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I was involved 10 years before that. I was there at the beginning,
Okay.
which was 1990. So I was like 37 when we were starting.
So the reason why I asked that is I'm about 33 now, 2 kids myself, married. What we're seeing here, and I mean this in the greatest possible way, is we are seeing a new generation come in. And we're seeing a lot of, people such as yourself, many of the names we've said, getting older. It's natural, right? No matter what we do for our bodies, time waits for no one. What would you like to see from people my age, the next generation, specifically with what the work you've been doing, both in business at HeartMath, because you're so much more. I know we've been talking about HeartMath quite a lot, but you're so much more like well-rounded and in many ways like a Renaissance man, right? Than just that. But what would you like to see for people my age or just over, or maybe even just younger, in terms of continuing this on? Taking over that mantle and picking up the mantle, I should say, and starting to continue to grow this concept and this idea.
Mm. Well, I would say one thing is that coherence is a universal principle. We used that term to name what we were investigating, and it caught on because it's a nice neutral word. It's not culty. It doesn't sound like in language coherence. Everybody doesn't automatically relate to it, but they can figure out what it means. It's pretty self evident. So luckily we're dealing with things that are not just about a trend, but they're kind of universal principles. But I think that one of the interesting challenges today compared to when we started is, I mean, when we started, email was just starting. Websites were just starting. There was no internet, commercial internet to speak of. There was no digital communication. Nobody was texting. I remember the first time I received a text, I was actually in London. I'd just been in the Netherlands to work with Unilever, and I had to have a European mobile phone. And the lady from Unilever texted me, I thought, what is this? My phone is, there's a message. What? And now it's not just that obviously we now live on phones and digital devices, but the nature of communication has changed so dramatically, and in large part for the worse, in my opinion. We are now used to living in fragmented thinking and fragmented language. We are used to a 3 sentence request responded by yes, or you ask 4 questions in a text message or an email, and they respond only to the last one, because we are so flipping around to try to keep up, and because we're addicted to the flow of information or whatever other reasons. And so I'm not a Luddite. I mean, I did turn off my phone before this started, so there would not be any attempt for the phone to ring and shut down the video, as I've had happen a number of times. But I think there's a challenge, because especially the younger a person is, the more that's all they know is relating to a device, communicating with people through devices. And we're seeing young people, especially, many of them don't even want to talk to others because they're not comfortable with it. Kids that, bless their hearts, the millennial or Gen X parents who put their kids on digital devices at 2, because the parents both work in multiple jobs and they couldn't afford daycare or whatever, but that child, the effect on that child who is only related to a digital device since they were so little, not only related, but a large part is that is so familiar to them, so interacting with humans, other humans, is uncomfortable. And it's like, that's scary. And even younger people that I speak to, um, that are they almost romanticize texting. Like, texting is this marvelous, I get to see the whole record of all the text. Oh, that's so wonderful. I don't really want to talk on the phone because, that's just, it doesn't seem as real. And I think, wow.
Isn't it the opposite?
It's the
Right?
opposite, but so we're going against the tide here. And now here comes AI, and I think what's interesting too is the number of people who is obvious their response, a text response, has been done by AI. They did not write that response. They did not even write the text. They're offloading basic communication, one-on-one communication, to AI, thinking that makes them sound more intelligent. Yes, it does, but it's also fake. It's also not you. So we're more and more, I think we're accepting a level of fake in society. I mean, the number of AI ads I see on Instagram, on Facebook, wherever, where it is so obviously it's the same voice in 5 different bodies, and it's so obviously an AI video, but it's everybody's doing it because it's cheaper and it's faster. We can do whatever we want. And this old guy that looks amazing, and he's in his 80s, but his voice sounds about 30. That's fine because we're all accepting it. So our standards. I'm not just like an old guy saying our standards are going down, but I think we're losing a sense of realness because of an addiction to digital communication, and I think a general insecurity that many people have about how uncertain everything in the world is. So what's certain? Oh, well, my phone. At least I can stay connected to something happening on my phone. That seems certain. Well, no, it's no more certain. But so I don't know if I'm being useful in this answer, but I think it's especially challenging for people who don't remember sitting in my little closet as a high school age kid talking to my girlfriend for 3 hours on the phone, because that what else could you do? You weren't with the cord. You had there was no option to hang at her house, let alone text her. And I'm not saying we have to go back to that, but and I'm not also romanticizing, oh, those were the good old days, but I'm just saying there is a price for for a lot of this. Just because we now can do it doesn't mean it's better. It doesn't mean we should. So I choose to go outside a lot, but I have lots of compelling reasons to say I should stay on my computer, because what if I miss a text? What if I miss an important email? So I have to run against the tide. I have to go constantly against the tide on a regular basis. And I think that's what we're going to have to do. And I think that's happening in the society in certain ways too. It's like society is saying no to certain things that is like, no, no, no. We can't have billionaires making all the decisions about our lives all the time. That's just not that's not. And it's taken us a while to kind of wake up to that reality going on, but no. And that's not just individuals saying that, that's countries, that's lots of uh, people. So I think the importance of connection, all the scientific research that's showing, whether it's longevity, whether it's chronic disease, whether it's well-being in general, connection keeps coming back as the one thing that's the key to all the centenarians in Okinawa and the blue zones. They're connected. They stay connected to a community. You're Italian families, people in Sardinia and other places, have that sense of connection. There was a famous study in the U.S. 40 years ago around, what was the name of the town in Pennsylvania, and it was a town that was mostly Italian community. Roseto. Roseto? No, I think it was Roseto. And it was this town that had the average American diet, high cholesterol, lots of eggs and meat and blah, blah, blah. Terrible diet, and a very low level of heart disease, like wildly low compared to the rest of the United States. And they tracked it down to there was a tremendous level of connection within the community. And then as time went on, kids didn't stay home so much. Or didn't stay in town. They would move on more, and there was a fracturing of the family dynamic. And within a generation, their health metrics were just as bad as the rest of the U.S. because that sense of connection, tight knit community, was being lost. That was research done 30, 40 years ago. Now there's so much research saying connection more than just about anything else, having meaningful personal connections in our life, social connections in our life. And that doesn't just mean lousy work, but at least you got some guys to drink beers with. No, it's more sophisticated than that. It's like the ability, like you and I are. We'd never met before this conversation started. I feel an awesome connection with you. You're a really interesting guy. I would love to reverse the roles and interview you more about your life. But the point is connection. And I think that we've got to do that because now our ability to connect is so distracted. We're so pulled back to the digital device.
Yeah, I want to be I do want to be mindful of time. However, you said something. So my wife is actually from Okinawa, by the way. Yeah, from the blue zones of Okinawa. I could just tell you right now, like, yes, there's branding, and I know this Dr. Suzuki Sensei, like Sensei Suzuki. I know the Wilcox twins, all of them, all the studies and all of it. And I could tell you, like, of course, there's some branding involved with the blue zones. However, it is very visibly obvious that there is a longevity element here because connection isn't just positively, right? Doesn't just affect your health positively. Lack of connection affects you negatively. It's like the equivalent of smoking cigarettes is loneliness. And we have so much data about this. So what you just said there is like so key. And some of the things, by the way, like if I didn't live in Nakijin village in the very far up north in the jungle in Okinawa myself, which actually is where that key is from, I wouldn't know. But with my own eye, you're like, this is real. They're up and walking. We're working their farms. Not casual box garden, but farms 70, 80 years old. There is really something tangible about this in the data. Bruce, I really appreciate it. I couldn't agree more with what you said there. I'm so fascinated by not just like what you've done, but who you were and what led you to some of these discoveries, these decisions, and there's so much. If I had more time, there's so much more I would love to dive into because you're such an eclectic person outside of just consciousness, and that's so rare. Like the idea of the Renaissance is like the Renaissance man is so cliche, but you have literally lived it on a high level in so many different industries. So dare I say, I'm definitely going to have a part two at some point and really dive into those other aspects of your life as well.
Well, and Quinton, I have to just throw in very quickly now that I can absolutely say in hundreds and thousands of interviews I've done over the years, I've never met anyone else like me who has a close family member from Okinawa. my sister-in-law is from Okinawa, and she moved in. She met my brother during the Vietnam War. He was wounded. He was evacuated to an Army hospital. He was a medic. He was then transferred to the U.S. Army Hospital in Okinawa, and he fell in love with the secretary to the chief of the hospital, Kimiko, who's still alive. She's in her 80s. Dear blessed Kimiko. And so when you mentioned your wife is from Okinawa, I felt this beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Oh, happy to do it. Definitely hoping to get a part two in the future here. I really appreciate it. I will let you go because I definitely want to make sure they're not banging down your door here. But I appreciate it.